Hi, morning, everybody. Just touching base, make sure everybody is hearing, everybody is seeing what's happening, any issues. Right, so trust everybody is actually safe this point in time in our unprecedented situation globally and locally. It's very trying and difficult, I think, for people to operate. So I can't imagine what some of you are going through itself, but nevertheless, thank you for joining and pressing ahead at this very close end of our particular program and this particular semester. So we are at lecture 9, which is an interesting lecture about organizational culture. But before we actually join in from that standpoint is making sure that we are on the right track. So our next page is obviously interesting topic, which is our assignment 1 that's due on the 29th, which is Sunday, and just some stuff for you to look at in terms of to cover some points I do believe that you need to look at. So just simple leadership traits, advantages of those traits. There are 6 sources of power: reward, cohesive, legitimate, referent, and expert and information. You need to take a look at that. Motivation, obviously, you need to look at leadership's units 3 and 4. Examples, this should include their participation, motivation, refer to motivation theories as an example, suggest this include in preparation, organizational control, power, conflict, which was unit 8 last week. So it's really important to make sure that you kind of review these things. It's a short answer. I don't think you're going to have any difficulty tackling this thing tomorrow. However, I'll try and make sure that Jude is around as well and online, and we can actually be there to support you if you have any questions, pertaining to it. So pretty easy, different. Again, we shouldn't lose focus on leadership, what we're looking for from leadership, from yourself. Again, 2 things to look at: traits and behaviors. Traits, something that's innate into you, some of their characteristics. Behaviors, in terms of, what behaviors you think you can learn, adapt for situations where things go. So interesting enough, this particular lecture is all about culture, and culture is interesting. Amar Baid basically had an interesting quote here, which I like to share with you, and we can kick off today's class with it. An organization's capacity to execute its strategy depends on its hard infrastructure, its organization structure and systems, and its soft infrastructure, its culture and norms. Interesting concept. Again, this is going to change: soft infrastructure, its culture, its norms. We're seeing the country even trying to grip when government is trying to implement social distancing in very strange way. This is new to us. Somebody being told, I can't go somewhere, I can't do something, I need to stay in my house. There's no war, there's no state of emergency. How do you deal with that? Again, it's culture. It's what you believe is right, what you believe is wrong, what's in there, how the country is set up, how we are set up, how we interpret. I've always said in class that one of our challenges is basically perception is the reality of the uninformed. I mean, this is real now. The more uninformed you are, the more negative your perception can be. We may want to argue that the flip side is true, because the amount of information we are getting from various sources, is it true? So again, the soft infrastructure is creating a lot of issues for us in this current pandemic. So where's the hard infrastructure for us to follow? What happens in a situation like this? Have we really set up ourselves? Is this what a rainy day is all about? Interesting concept. So let's just jump straight into what is culture. So again, our challenges with regards to culture, and we've all mentioned culture in some form or fashion, and to understand itself, when we speak, we refer to the culture of our country, our society, of our college here at CTS, our group inside of this particular classroom, leadership and organization. But our scenario is, what do we actually mean? You know, quite simply, it's a word that can be used to describe everything we do in the group: what we think, the way we speak, how we act, what we do. And all of these determine literally the distinct characteristic of our group. And this characteristic is what we call culture. Interesting concept in terms of how it arrives to that. So going further, in any organization, you know, we talk of culture in an organization, we really need to look into it much deeper. And to really come to a decision to see what that organization culture is, we have to basically get a decision that, in our understanding, how it is going to affect the organization, how is it going to affect the people that operate in the organization, and that's basically, in a sense, what culture is. So culture of an IT company, culture of a pharmaceutical company, all of these are different, are going to be different. Employment in an organization with part-timers, with full-time, it's shift workers, the culture is going to be different. So 3 interesting definitions. Hofstede says, the collective programming of the mind which distinguish the members from one organization from another. Kind of a widespread. I'm not saying that it's hit on. Lewis says, a set of understanding and meanings, or meanings shared by a group of people. The meanings are largely tacit among members, are clearly relevant to the particular group, and are distinctive to the group. Meanings are passed on to new members. And this, we spoke about this in terms of new people joining an organization, and you don't have a proper induction program, and you put them to shadow somebody, especially an old employee or employee that has been there for a very long time and has bad habits. This is obviously what's going to be passed on to the new person. And Dale and Kennedy in 1982 says, and this is interesting, culture may be defined as the way we do things around here. How pertinent is that? The way we do things around here. Oh yeah, it's okay. Work in civil service, yeah, don't worry. I can afford to get to work for 9 o'clock. I'll leave by 2 o'clock. Why? Why is that culture? Is it really Dale and Kennedy saying the way we do things around here? Kind of, wow. Hits us for hard to realize that culture basically is how things are perceived as well. So a definition that we can look at, right? And a gentleman by the name of Alec Haverstick says, in large part, culture is a product of compensation. Interesting. I'll read that again. In a large part, culture is a product of compensation. This is from a gentleman called Alec Haverstick. So culture is powerfully shaped by incentives. The best predicator of what people will do is what they are incentivized to do. Interesting. So the way that somebody is going to operate is determined by how they are paid or what incentives they're given. Kind of makes you wonder now about unions. Is this created? This is literally something that's Alec Haverstick is saying is created. And incentives here is not just only monetary rewards. It's the non-monetary rewards, such as status, recognition, maybe promotions within an organization, sanctions, you know, to which the organization and its members, you know, are subjected to. When you have a lockout, what's going on? So it comes back now to get to the actual definition. We looked at the first 3 with Hofstede, Lewis, Dale, and Kennedy Organizational culture is defined as the underlying beliefs, assumptions, values, and ways of interacting that contribute to the unique social and psychological environment of an organization. Wow, a little bit long-winded, but interesting. It is defined as the underlying beliefs, assumptions. How many times we've heard that growing up in Trinidad with our grandparents and so forth, saying, don't make assumptions, don't assume, because, and again, that's the way we learn to spell assume, right? So you break it up into three and don't make a ass of you and me, so to speak, to get the word assumption, or assume. So interesting. It's defined by the underlying beliefs, assumptions, values, and ways of interacting. Interesting concept. So again, as a leader, what values are you setting? How are you allowing your employees or your charges to interact? What are the underlying beliefs? Is the boss a walkover? Is the boss very autocratic but claims to be democratic? So you realize that culture is an important part. So I think it's important to understand that. So next slide is, what is organizational culture? Is the customary and traditional way of doing things which is shared by all its members, meaning within an organization, which new members must learn in order to be accepted. Wow. Organizational culture, and this is basically really long in terms of the amount of points that they have raised here, covers a wide range of behavior, methods of production, job skills, technical knowledge, attitude towards discipline, punishment, customs, habits of managerial behavior, objectives of the company, its way of doing business, methods of payment, values placed on different types of work, etc., beliefs in democratic living, joint consultation, less conscious conventions and taboos. So it still has a last point open-ended. And that's interesting. Shen in 1992 developed a model which is called the Iceberg Metaphor. Not sure if you've heard about it. So in some ways, by trying to define culture, sometimes we are really oversimplifying it. And Shen's metaphor is often used, which is basically true, to state the distinction between visible, for want of a better word, artifacts of culture, and some of the invisible aspects of culture. So again, in this case, this particular metaphor basically, or the analogy, shows there are aspects of culture that we can see and aspects that we don't see. But these that we don't see lie under the surface and form a very large part of the culture. So again, as the metaphor is illustrating, that many of the key features of culture are often outside our conscious awareness. Interesting. So Shin is basically telling us that visible is easy to see, facial expression, language, music, visual arts, dress, whatever. And that's awareness. And out of consciousness awareness, or the difficult to see, the invisible, is basically where all the culture relies. Thought process, concept of fairness, concept of justice, the nature of friendship, learning styles, assumptions, perceptions, attitude, desires, values, expectations, your approaches to problem solving. Not everybody is going to share that. You sit down there sometimes and you determine, all right, how I'm going to tackle this. When am I going to tackle it? Why do we wait last minute? That's part of our culture. What are we doing from that standpoint? So to further simplify this, what I did is a different iceberg to kind of a breaking down. Same concept. So the artifacts, the tangible manifestations of culture is what we see. uniform, style of dress, product, service, buildings, office, hierarchy, right? Or organization structure, rituals, ceremonies, etc. And these have basic values that are set up in them. Interesting. So the ethical statements of righteousness, vision, mission, beliefs, values. But basic assumptions is what is underneath, what we don't see. Unconsciousness and for granted ways of seeing the world. Power, politics, leadership styles, unwritten rules, even religion to some extent can actually be here because that's not a typical question you ask in your interview. So, wow, interesting concept. So, really and truly, coming back to our definitions now that you've seen these slides and look at it from that standpoint. So, what is culture? Hofstede says the collective programming of the mind which distinguish members of one organization from another. Lewis, which we had said as well, again, just to repeat it, a set of understandings or meanings shared by a group of people. The meanings are largely tacit among members, are clearly relevant to a particular group, and or are distinctives to a particular group. Meanings are passed on to new members of the group, obviously, when they join, which is either through employment or joining a union. And the last is it the way we do things around here? Deal and Kennedy? Interesting. So, again, how does that fit? As a leader, what are you trying to institute besides your leadership trait? Besides directing people, a culture is something that you have to be mindful of and have that set up within your department, within your organization as well. And all of this now means that when we are hiring somebody now, there is a huge part that we need to look at and we don't. This is the cultural fit from that standpoint. Sorry, 1 second. I just want to cough. Right. So, what the cultural fit is stating, instead of looking just at the job related skills and experience of hiring somebody, culture focused companies expand their selection criteria to include cultural fit. Assessing applicants' personalities and values, the assumptions is that skills are easier to develop than personality traits, attitude, and values. Wow, that's a strong statement from that standpoint, but it's very applicable. And I'm quite sure even some of you who have changed jobs recently realize, wait, I have this skill. You know, why have I been staying in that job and didn't look around to move before? You know, is this company now, this new role opening you up? Is it actually allowing you to be more innovative, more creative? So you realize that it's not just about hiring someone, it's hiring someone that will fit into the organization, hiring someone that will fit into the various team members, hiring someone that will basically adapt to the way we do things around here, Dale and Kennedy, or hiring someone that will learn the norms and the cultures of an organization. Luis, interesting concept in terms of, wow, where does cultural fit look at? So one of the key factors is obviously looking at an organization, which we have a small case study, is IKEA. And their recruitment is based on cultural fit. Sorry. Sorry, drank some water there too fast. Right. So IKEA has 4 points here that they've raised. IKEA's standard job questionnaire downplays skill, experience, or academic credentials. The questionnaire asks job applicants about values and beliefs. Comments about values and belief become the basis for screening, interviewing, training, and development. When IKEA employees apply internally for new jobs or leadership position, the main focus is once again on values in an effort to ensure consistency. Do we agree with that? What's our take on something like that? How do we how do we get to that particular point? Another good example is FedEx. No one on the FedEx leadership team has come from outside of the organization. They've all at one point in time would have delivered a package as a driver, as a delivery person, as a FedEx man, or as we would say, UPS man or DHL man. Amazing. Why? Because they want to make sure that you get to the top of the organization. You don't lose what this organization about. It's about delivering that package, getting it there on time, dealing with customers, dealing with the people on the front end. It's a whole different state of thinking when you've come from within the organization. I mean, cultural fit is difficult to just bring into an organization. What happens if that organization has unions? What if it's not part of your beliefs? What if it's not part of your value and the union is going to have a lockout? What's going to happen when you go into a different department or you move into a different department that's union run? Are you going to get ahead? Are they going to basically downplay you? I'm sure you're in jobs that have challenges, and we've always heard the statement, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. So again, cultural fit, very, very important to look at. So a modification again to Shin's iceberg looks at the whole scenario of vision, strategy, values, structure, policies, but then comes back now to what's, I would say, Dale and Kennedy is actually saying about culture. The way we say we get things done, or the way we really get things done, which is underneath the shared assumptions, the procedures, the perceptions, the values, the norms, the unwritten rules, the stories, the feelings. Interesting. So Dale and Kennedy is actually on point to say that culture is the way we do things around here. It's wrapping it up in that sense from that standpoint. Interesting. So what's the creator and maintenance of organizational culture, and where does it go? How does it get to this particular point? How do we reach that particular point to say, hey, how do I develop this? What's really going on from that standpoint? So one of the key factors is obviously looking at Hofstede again in this whole creation, maintenance of organizational culture. And he has 13 points that has been listed here itself. The founder, obviously, is going to basically, whoever is the founder of the organization is going to have some sort of a say. Their pictures are generally on the wall, or strong statements or quotes are on the wall. What's the HR process, the recruitment, selection, and promotion? What about the stories that come about? Oh, don't say anything here. This person will get upset. Don't do this here. Don't do that. That person is very well liked because it's whatever with the boss or whatever. We've heard so many stories. I don't know if anybody works at SM Jaleel about nepotism. I mean, the gentleman that leads the organization now has maintained his father's legacy by hiring any family member that needs a job. There's so much family, it's unbelievable that the HR department has lots of challenges at SM Jaleel. but they are evolving as an organization. It's not just a local organization. It's a global organization operating in 15 different countries. Interesting concept. So again, stories says a lot. The size of the organization will also say something. The use of technology is also going to say something as well. And in terms of maintaining goals, objectives, what goals and objectives are there set for the organization? The environment that you're operating. Look at what's going on now. What do you think is going to happen with regards to culture? Do you think that we can go back to normalcy? What would we consider as normal going back now? Those of you that are on the road and are going to work and doing what you may consider now that the government has labeled what is essential and non-essential, what happens? Are you now setting a tone to tell people, listen, make sure you get a job in an essential company so that if something happens, you would always have work because you work in an essential company? Is that public health regulation number 4 something that we need to change? We need to redefine, because of the environment now determines the culture of the organization. The environment determines the viability of your organization in unprecedented times like we are in now. Interesting. People in the organization, obviously. I've put in this break here because Johnson and Scholes actually modified Hofstede's 8 points to include these 5 additional. And Johnson and Scholes basically says, what about symbols? Somebody in a very religious or somebody that wears a particular symbol or does something. It says something from that standpoint with regards to the culture. Rites, rituals, routines. We've spoken about this. The water cooler meetings, coming to work and going to have breakfast and organizing and washing up and cleaning up and then getting to your desk at 8:45. Creating that clock watching scenario. What happens in that? Obviously, power structures, and there's Handy's power structure. There are 4 power structures that are expanded upon. Organizational structures, how it's actually done. Control systems, what happens? What do you think about clocking cards? What does that do? What does that say? In terms of clocking cards and doing that. What is the moral of the person? I mean, I understand the concept of it, but what it is that I have to line up and clock my card to go in and clock my card to come out, but I'm working in an office. What's the situation? There are other ways if you want to track employees. Why would we put certain, what I would consider archaic control systems that can demoralizes a person, in terms of I have to come in and clock a card, I have my stuff, I've done my degree, I've done this, I've done that. People have that thought behind themselves. Why am I doing that from that standpoint? It's an interesting way of doing. Control systems have a way of bringing forth a sort of a resistance. What happens? I'm quite sure some of you now in these unprecedented times, we go and we see the grocery now. We see Price Mart, we see Super Farm, and you have to line up because they're only allowing so many people into the actual store. Why? Because we can't be too close to one another. Rules are now, because of the unprecedented times we are in, suggest social distancing in every aspect. Is this the control system? Is this a way now that, yep, literally, I say hi to somebody and that's basically extremely formal and informal at the same time, loving and unloving at the same time, show empathy at the same time. Somebody is not well, what do? I have to send a emoticon and say, okay, I'm sending a hug and send you a text. Funny situation from that standpoint, but again, reality of it. So this creation, maintenance of organizational culture, what does it mean And what does it matter for the leaders of the organization? Interesting. So Daft and Smith has two interesting points here. Leaders influence organizational culture and ethical values. Not a problem. It's about market share and profit. Organizational culture can be used as a way of differentiating organizations strategically, and this is proven to be linked to success, profitability, and market share. Lots of organizations sell clothes, but the experience of buying in a store and the product offerings are influenced by corporate culture. We've spoken about that. The ladies in class, how do you feel about buying online, clothes especially? You don't get to try it, you don't get to feel it, you have to look at it, you're not sure about the fit. But eventually we are coming around more and more. The situation at hand now forces us to go down that particular way. Interesting. Smith, culture is a vehicle through which an organization identity emerges in terms of what it stands for, how its employees should behave, and what it believes in. Wow. Pretty deep, Smith's definition here of why does it matter for leaders. Sorry, Brad. So really and truly, as future leaders, what are you looking for? What are you looking to develop? What's our situation where that is concerned in terms of, hey, am I going to really do this? You know, what's happening from that standpoint? So a little bit different. So again, now we've looked at that and we realize that there are different types of organizational culture. We're going to look at it from Dale and Kennedy perspective. And the very first one is more or less what is called a macho culture or tough guy. So I'll just throw up the whole slide and we'll quickly go through them. So there are four. And, you know, the tough guy is you take high risk. The goal is to become a star. It's an intense pace and pressure, you know, by the organization to get ahead. What's actually happening from that standpoint? What do I have to be? Do I have these characteristics to go into advertisement, the entertainment industry, publishing, sports, into police? Do I have a tough guy approach? They say that people have they make reference to a small man syndrome, and he basically portrays this macho culture. You know, his bark is better than his bite, so to speak. You know, because you look at all of these small breed dogs, and they're always barking like crazy. You know, because why? They have a macho culture because they need to be seen and heard, and they have to look aggressive and so forth and whatever have you. I think this is where we're looking at in terms of what the tough guy macho culture is all about. Obviously, the other one is interesting in terms of work hard, play hard culture. So you work hard and you play hard. So that means that you're doing all your stuff and you're still going to go out and you're still going to have your limes and, make those efforts to beat your buddies and do certain things or whatever. So, but this says it takes few risk, high level of relatively low risk activity. Action with fun is the rule. Real estate agents, IT companies, retail companies, mass consumer companies like McDonald's, work hard, play hard culture. This is an interesting one itself. It's a little bit different and it's also high skilled people as well. It's bet your company culture. What Dale and Kennedy is saying, it's a high risk, slow feedback environment. Big stake decisions, but years before decision pays off. Sometimes millions in pounds of investment and years to develop. Pharmaceuticals, developing a new drug, developing a new technique. Where is it going? What's actually going on? Lots of work, lots of research. Oil companies, drilling, doing these different things, and you spend years before you actually hit the jackpot, so to speak. And then we have what is the most common, process culture. Emphasis on how things are done. Highly bureaucratic. Banks, insurance companies, civil service, government organizations. Interesting concept. What do you think about this? What do you believe this is all about? Do you think that your organization is very process oriented? There are three things that you should actually look at taking away in terms of as future managers and what it is you're doing. It's all about people. It's all about the process you set up for those persons and the tools to drive those process. And we have to be careful that we don't let the process drive the organization, because then we become rigid. It's like going into the bank and saying that you need to have a utility bill. And you then realize, wait, but I don't have a utility bill in my name. And the bank is, oh, you have to have a utility bill, otherwise you can't open an account. And you realize that, look, listen, you're missing the process. I can show you where I've received a birthday card with my name on it. The reason for the utility bill is to confirm your address, to confirm that you are living in a valid address. So what happens in that process culture? The process overruns it now that the person behind the counter says, you must have a utility bill in your name, otherwise you can't open an account. No, that's not what the central bank regulation states. I don't know if we have any bankers in class. Would be nice for you if you can validate the central bank's regulation. But the bottom line behind it is that process culture is so real that you have to be careful about it. We have to be mindful that, hey, what happens? I mean, are we just saying that we need this and this is the only way? What happened before? Why the requirement has come about? It has come about because of anti-money laundering. You want to know what's happening. You may not necessarily have a utility bill, but you know what? I'm in a credit union and I get a bank statement, or I get a statement from the credit union every month, or I am in this club and I get a statement every month coming to me, or I am in this organization. And it's just to verify, but you realize that sometimes people just concentrate on the process and not really realize what the process has been set up for. So it's all about three things to look at: people, process, and tools. And what happens? How do you rearrange them and how do you set them up defines what's going to happen. Interesting concept with Dale and Kennedy on types of organizations. The second set of stuff is basically Handy. And what Handy is saying is, whilst accepting that culture is complex, Handy in 1993 in Mullins, page 2016, year 2016, page 540, identify 4 main types of organizational culture. So this is going to be power, role, task, and person. Interesting. Let's just quickly go through these 4 so you can kind of wrap your head around it from that standpoint. So the very first one is basically power. Whoops, right. And there is task, role, and last, person that we spoke about. And again, we need to really decide what happens and how do we define Handy's power culture, task culture, and realize how it's affecting us. So interesting concept to look at. So let's just go into the first one. Usually a single source of power. So this is more of a proprietor own and run business, right? He's the boss. It's everything is centered around there from that standpoint. And it can be considered a web structure. So few rules, little need for bureaucratic process. I'm the boss. I'm in the middle here. So obviously when the boss is not there, nobody does anything. Lots of downsides to it as well. You can look at it, but interesting. So we list out these 5 items. Control exercise from the center. Individuals are encouraged to perform their task with few questions asked. Greatest strength is to act quickly because it's a small organization. It's not toppled with bureaucratic processes itself. It's small. Success depends on the ability of persons or people at the center. Larger the organization gets, the more fragile the web becomes because then, you know, it's only that one person. The structure has to change. So using the web as a very good example here, an analogy, the larger the organization gets, the more fragile the web comes. So the other one is the Greek temple. And this is really interesting because of how it looks like. And it's really telling us all about the processes and rules and how structured we are. Organizations based on functions and specialization, right? Rules, procedures, job descriptions dominate. That's not my job. I'm not doing that. My job states this is what I need to do. My job states this is what's actually happening. My job states that I need to be in the classroom from 8:20 to 11:20. I'm not to supervise the children. I'm to stay in the staff room and I come out 10 minutes before. And you have lots of changes. Why? Because you're trying to put a process in place. You believe that you're being taken advantage of as a teacher. I don't know, maybe, could be. Something drives that. So again, 5 items to look at with regards to role culture, also known as the Greek temple structure. Culture exists in a safe, stable, and predictable environment because it's structured within these walls. This is what we do. This is what we do when we come in. This is what happens. Culture is one of bureaucracy. No, no, no. I can only do this now because this is what is required. Yes, my supervisor is not here, but this is what I need to do, and this is all I can do. Therefore, adverse of taking risk because obviously I'm going to be penalized, right? Because the process says this is what is needed. So, bit of a challenge. And it can be frustrating to the ambitious or power oriented because this is not the organization for me. This is not me. I'm willing to help the people that are in front of me, but I can't because the process is keeping me back. Main problem, slow to recognize and react to change. Typical oil industry, banks, civil service, a little bit long-winded in terms of how they do things from that standpoint. So the other one now is basically, which is called a net structure. And focus in this particular organization is task or project focus, where teams are assigned. Power therefore is diffused and based on expertise rather than position. So this person is the certified project uh, um, manager because they are PMP certified, or this is logistics because they are SIPS certified, or this is IT because they are Cisco certified, or whatever happens from that standpoint. So again, a little bit longer in that there are 6 items here with regards to the net structure. Culture focuses on the job at hand and therefore very customer oriented. Also very much a team culture. Flexibility, adaptability, individual autonomy prevails, product lifespans are short, constant innovation is necessary, it's constant learning, you have to be certified, you have to be doing this, etc. Weakness is that such organizations do not build up depth of expertise and heavily reliant on quality of its people. So when somebody leaves an organization in this situation, it hurts the organization big time. So it's a bit of a challenge. So I mean, it's interesting, but it's not something that is ideal from that standpoint. Can I just ask for just 1 second there? I need to cough again there. And let me just top up my water. 1 second. Right, apologies there, people. Okay, much better. Whew. Right, so the last one in Handy's topology in terms of organizational culture is the cluster structure. And this is a little bit different itself, but again, it's more, I guess, something that we can relate to. So organizations is a group of people who decide to work together and organize themselves as a collective. And this is more of a person culture. You would see this in law firms, doctors, maybe accounting firms where you have a bunch of accountants working and so forth. So it's a little bit different. And again, three points here in terms of the person culture or the cluster structure. Each has a complete autonomy in what they do and how they do it. Influence is generally shared, in terms of opinions, what's going on. And you see that a lot in terms of law firms. They've listed as barristers here. Um, Rules and other mechanisms are minimum significance. So it's not about process. All right. This is not about tools. It's more about the person itself or the people itself in terms of the cluster structure. So what has happened is we now have what is called sub cultures. And again, just put up the whoops. Wow. Strange. Don't know how this happened. Anyhow, so executive management and blue collar subcultures, which Williams talks about, professional, administrative, and customer interface subcultures. And then we have last departmental subcultures. So again, the executive is going to give you the perspective and beliefs about strategic decisions. Management is going to focus on managing and resourcing. Blue collar is going to focus on the production and service. So this was actually a study done by Hofstede that talked about, I think it was a Danish insurance company, and part of the professional subculture was to view women as having the administrative subculture. And I don't think that this exists anymore, but this categorization is still very much valid in that admin are typically women. I mean, it's like hearing it's not very common as well in terms of the nursing industry. You tend you don't have as many male nurses, so it's more or less labeling people to be in a particular area. Well, yeah, he's a male nurse. Oh yeah, she's a admin, she's a secretary. What does that mean? Why are we using to define, oh, she's a secretary? What does that mean from that standpoint? And that's this subculture that Hofstede is actually looking at from there, right? And how that works. And obviously, departmental subcultures. Oh yeah, don't work with her. She's in HR. No, you can't make her because they're in HR. No, don't say anything. They are in payroll. No, don't say anything. They're in finance. So we do have those departmental subcultures popping up for various reasons and how these things work from there. Okay, so we have to be mindful of it and be aware of it from that standpoint. So again, there's nothing accidental about cultural strengths. There's a relationship between an organizational culture and its performance. This is Heller on basically Heineken and how Heineken has dominated the world's beer market. You know what I mean? So again, yeah, wow, what's happening from that standpoint? Armstrong and Barron says performance management is a process which contributes to the effective management of individuals and teams in order to achieve high level of organizational performance. As such, it enables shared understanding about what is to be achieved and approach to leading and developing people, which will ensure that it is achieved. So interesting. So Hella is basically saying that, you know, there's nothing accidental about cultural strengths. And there is a huge relationship between culture and its performance. Do we agree at this? Do we think that that is something that's real? Yes, it is. I mean, if you know your organization is going to deliver something, if you know your organization is going to reward you, if you know your organization is compassionate, displays empathy towards its employees and stuff, aren't you going to go the extra mile? Are you going to do that itself from that standpoint? Again, that's something that, yeah, if you're the leader, well, yes, look, Barry is doing it. Yes, look, Sheila is doing it. If she could do it, why not me? You know, and that's something that says something about it in terms of, wow, there is a connection between culture and performance. Look what's going on. Look what's happening. If they can do it, who is me? If I can actually demonstrate that I can abstain from something, or as in this particular unprecedented times that we are in now, and self quarantine, then who is somebody else to do it, you know, or not to do it? So it does have a tying effect, culture and performance. So interesting concept. So let's just look into performance management and where we are. So performance management is a process. It's not an event. It's not happening every Friday at 2 o'clock, you know, with coffee and biscuits. Okay. It is a process that you have to go through. And it is a continuous process. One of the things that you are going to have to understand is that as leaders, whether you are at the head of the department or the head of the organization, you have to have your one-on-one meetings. You have to have your performance evaluations. These one-on-one meetings, what you're describing, what's happening, you have to look at internal, external, where you decide to use SWOT analysis, whether you decide to do any of the other tools itself. It's something that's continuously looking at. So we have to measure, we have to have an appraisal, we have to have actions, we have to continue monitoring. And that's something that we've looked at even at the Six Sigma standpoint of plan, act, do, monitor. And you continuously do that all the time. So this is just telling us that in measurement, establish performance measures, establish measurable goals, measure current behaviors. Obviously, appraisals, compare current behaviors with the behavioral goals and identify the differences. Action for each difference, plan how to bring actual behaviors in line with the goals in order to improve performance. Implement a plan. And then obviously last is monitoring. Check the new plans are being followed, return to the appraisal stage to assess impact of changes on the behavioral and performance measurements. So interesting scenario. So obviously our next step here is, how do we look at performance and culture and what happens itself? So this slide basically tells us from Reed and Hubble, creating a performance culture. Leadership in high performance culture does not reside only at the top of the organization. It must emerge from and cascade down to those in customer facing roles. Leadership must be combined with strategy. It must be ongoing, consistent, and grounded in on the job learning. It must be supported by formal learning and leadership initiatives. Wow. Phew. A little long-winded, but in order to have that high performance culture, it comes back now to hiring people. That cultural fit is a tie-in. As the leader of the organization, do I have to dot all my I's and cross all my T's with my staff, or can I bring the idea to my team and bam, they're going to actually run with it from that standpoint? And I think that's basically what you're looking at. You want to create that culture that things will happen. In order to do that, you have to hire people that will also be there. You have to have that high performance scenario. To have that high performance, you have to have a high performance team. To have that, you have to have the culture of the organization. So interesting. Last paragraph here is, in high performance cultures, effective leaders clearly articulate a strategic framework of mission, vision, and values, strategic goals, and the critical few measurable priorities. Hear that, eh? Critical, few, measurable, because it's not about that. The end result is going to speak volume because we're going to achieve that. We're going to achieve our mission, our vision, and the company is going to get where it's going to get to. They design and take accountability for managing service-oriented, efficient business processes and structures. Leaders engage in their people and work hard to learn their strengths and preferences. They manage their talent well and encourage ongoing learning. They communicate rigorously and often. So an interesting concept. Leaders engage their people and work hard to learn their strengths and preferences. That's a strong statement that we need to take away from this, in the sense of, wow, if you need to be a great leader and you want to have that culture, you have to work hard to learn your people, their strengths and preferences, so you know what's happening. Again, it comes back to hiring. It comes back to how the organization is structured. Looking at Handy's structures, those four structures, what's actually happening from that standpoint? What's going on? That's four power structures. So how do we create the high performance cultures? So cultures that facilitate high performance are often incorporated the following values, three of them. The whole is more important than parts, and boundaries between parts are minimized. Wow, deep. Equality and trust are primary values. An interesting concept. We spoke about this in the sense that if you don't trust your leader, that's a big thing in any relationship. If trust is not there, whew, we're going through from that standpoint. Culture encourage risk-taking, change, and improvement, understanding that. So Richard Duff basically really comes up, high-performance cultures emphasizes both values and solid business performance as the driver of organizational success. Interesting. So why we have all of this high performance cultures, structures, doing this stuff, and somebody comes and hires one of you, what happens? And you have to change that. Then there's a concept, there's another concept to look at. Why does organizational culture need to be changed? And how is it going to be changed? It's not just hiring you as well, as a leader, as a head of department. It's bringing in somebody with a difference itself. And that culture within an organization has to. And how and what or why does culture need to be changed? Because if you want to get something done, you need to basically change things. I'm bringing somebody new into department because, as head of department, because they'll bring a different way of doing something. You see things differently. You will be able to mesh the team from that standpoint. So culture change is usually associated with organizational change, which is brought about by, and we've listed these 8 things here. Challenges of growth, especially global markets, challenges of economic downturns, and tougher trading conditions like what's happening now. Changes in strategy, technological changes, bringing in new systems, cloud-based systems, looking at different things from that standpoint. Changes in strategy, technological changes, you know, having some stuff there. 1 second there, please. Yeah, so our challenge is obviously changes, competitive pressures. What's going to happen now, including mergers and acquisitions? What do you think is going to happen to if your organization is a non-essential organization? Where and how is that going to change? Customer pressure. Are people now going to look at now in terms of contentment? Do I buy what I want or do I only buy what I need? Because things are changing drastically. The way we're going to do business moving forward. If this continues, remember, I said habit forming is doing something consistently over and over in a particular way for 21 days. If we continue down this particular path, are we now going to adapt to social distancing as the norm? Are we now going to adapt in terms of how organizations operate? Do I now need to look at essential and non-essential? Is non-essential businesses now going to operate on a part-time basis because it's not needed all the time? How is that going to change? So interesting. Customer pressure, technological changes, mergers, acquisitions, economic downturns. Wow. The second to last, to learn new organization behaviors and skills. And the last, government legislation initiatives. What is the government bringing forward into it? What's actually happening from that standpoint? So I'm quite sure you all would have seen the public health regulation that was put out by the ministry, by the Minister of Health, Regulation 4. And clearly, you know, what it states as essential and non-essential. Interesting concept. So again, government legislation initiatives. That's going to push cultural change to an extent, right? So again now, there is Lewin's 1947 developed a 3-step model in terms of dealing with organizational change. And what Lewin's basically, and I think there was a video on this on StudyNet that you could take a look at, is that there are 3 steps. You unfreeze, you establish a clear vision for the need of change, ensure that the driving force of change outweigh the restraining and negative elements. So there's an analysis to be done. Then you move, make the change through altering, reconfiguring tasks and processes, and changing the actions and behaviors of people and technology in terms of what you're doing. And then you refreeze, reinforce the behavior through recognition, reward, review results, make modifications when necessary. And this is something that you will continuously do, you know, to get to that particular point. The field analysis that Lewin's basically is talking about is to push the change. Clear management goals, stable employee relations. There's no big set of union. You can afford to change working hours. You can change the way things are done culturally within the organization, right? Clear vision and objectives for change. Available resources to be able to do. Change is going to bring about money. You have to change the way things are done. Maybe changing the way the color of the office is, changing windows, setting up different meeting rooms or different things itself, you know, physical infrastructure. Again, human resources as well, you know, so it's not just financial resources. External pressures, competition is going to force that as well. Employee adaptability. Can the group of employees that you have change? Is it going to create more issues, right? Economies of scale, right? Clearer management control. So interesting concept. Retraining, restraining forces against change. Why these force field analysis will tell you not to change. Individual and group employee resistance, structural issues, leadership weaknesses, the systems that you have in place, the processes, the habits, you know, entrench interest of stakeholders. The bank is not going to lend you any money because they're happy the way it's being done. You know, what's actually going on from that. The union is not going to look at wanting to change because they may lose membership. They may lose revenue. Lack of resources, whether it's financial or human. Threat to power bases. With this change, people will lose, you know, being at the top of the organization, you know, the organization culture itself. So interesting in terms of having to need to change to get to that particular point. You can see that there are going to be challenges and there are going to be probably opportunities to push you to make something happen. So the other aspect is now looking at what is called Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington in their strategic exploring strategic management. They talk about the cultural web, and the cultural web basically are these 6 main items that drives the paradigm of the organization. So the analysis of the culture as it is now using the cultural web. What are the stories? What are the symbols? What are the structures of the organization? The power structures? Where are they coming from? Are they all ex St. Mary's boys? Are they all ex convent girls and so forth? All of these creates power structures. You know, whether we think that they exist or not, they do. You know, control systems, rituals, routines, right? And we need to be able to look at the cultural web, highlight these, and then look at the differences and determine where they lie in Lewin's forces analysis and what happens. So the third aspect of all of this here is using John Cotter's 8-step change model, which we had spoken about earlier in the game itself, or earlier in this particular course. So this model can also be applied to culture change, as organizational culture change are inextricably linked and generally happen simultaneously, right? So again, this is what John Cotter's 8-step is all about, and it's divided into, even though it's 8-step, it's 3 stages. And the very first stage is creating the conditions for change. It just cannot happen like that. You have to have that need for the change, increase urgency, build coalitions, have the vision, have the communication, and then that sets the motion for change from that standpoint. The next step in John Cotter's, or next stage in John Cotter's model is introducing the new practices, you know, enabling the actions, like winning, having that quick win, identifying it, celebrating it, making sure it's there. And then the third step or third stage is maintaining that momentum that this is actually going to happen and continue, right? Don't let up, continue with it, have the rewards, have the stuff, and then make it stick. Employee of the month, employee of the quarter, rewarding them with certain things, doing stuff itself. So organizations that do not or cannot evolve will not last. That's going to be the reality of what we are seeing in these slides as we've coming down to the end. Organizations that do not or cannot evolve will not last. And this is why it's important that you, as future leaders, proprietor owners, CEOs, departmental heads, managers, you know, this is where you are going to bring that skill now to show that, look, this is where you are going to be that leader from that standpoint. So after Cutter's scenario of his 8 steps and these 3 stages, you are going to have some resistance for change. And again, that's part of the culture. What are you going to do from that standpoint? So in this particular case, overcoming resistance to change, some strategies used to overcome resistance, and there are 5: education, communication, training and development, facilitation, having those team meetings, having a community meeting, a staff meeting, a general staff meeting, doing different things in team buildings, etc., consultation, negotiation, and you have to persuade people and you'll have to discipline people. And I mean, yes, that's something that is harsh. We're seeing the government is seeing that. According to the regulation, I think it's 50,000 is the charge if you breach the um, public health regulation 4. I'll have to check it to verify, but I think it's you know, it's again very harsh in that aspect. So that's coming down to the end of my slides. I have 2 slides after, which is an activity itself. And this is obviously something for you to think about in terms of the theory that you have been exposed to. So you can think of an organization where you've worked and try to use handy topology to describe the culture. Does the organization clearly fit into one of the types of cultures you've found, and that there are examples of other types of cultures in existence? Compare what you've found with other students, and you know, what conclusions can you draw from the exercise? And again, in this situation, that yes, it all depends on where your company is, what industry it is in, and you will get those varying differences that come up. A reflection to think about: formal annual performance appraisals are a complete waste of time. If you learn anything new, it only suggests that the continual monitoring of performance as part of the line manager's day-to-day role has not been undertaken properly. What do you think? What has been your experience with formal performance appraisals? And again, sometimes people just say that they're doing an appraisal, but it's not really an appraisal. And the example that I gave some time ago is in the teaching service. The principal has to appraise his teachers, but if he has to deviate, they're graded from scales 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, top notch. However, it's in the process of that evaluation, they basically can really only give a 3 from the standpoint that in giving a 3, you have the ability of saying that the person is average. If you have to give a person a 2, you need to get the school supervisor involved, you have to get service commission involved, and lots of challenges before you can get to that point. So you can't easily penalize someone, right? And I think the challenge is that, you know, how do you really make a difference from that standpoint with performance appraisals? So again, would be nice to hear what you have to say. Last is activity, either individually or in small group, consider the aspect of culture, provide an example, show where they fit on the Shin's iceberg model, what's visible, what's not visible. Think about the culture of your university or college, list some of the visible aspects of culture, what you consider to be more hidden underlying values, beliefs. Instead of using the iceberg model to illustrate the organizational culture, create your own visual image, draw something, draw a line, what's above, what's below. Identify some limitations of taking the published aspects of culture as true indication of the culture of the organization. What other questions might you want to ask to find out more? And again, that comes up to the other thing in terms of when you're interviewing someone and how are you interviewing someone to get that. So it's a 6 of one, half dozen the other, something that you have to be very careful. So again, the actual references that was used to kind of put some of these slides together. Sent out some nice PDFs for you to look at, as well as the core text. I think it's chapter 15, right, in Mullins. So you have something that you can look at from that standpoint. I do have some videos. So let me just stop sharing for a minute. See how I can get this off and get the videos for you. Leadership lecture 9. So right, so this is one of my videos here. Just get back to right. Everybody's hearing still? Yep. Okay.
So a little different in terms of how, you know, what you do and how it can affect you from one age to another age. So really interesting point there. Um, this one is a little bit funny there as well. Um, this was a video from StudyNet. So this was an interesting video that was also part of the StudyNet in terms of understanding culture. and where culture plays a part. So this last one is one of my videos, which is pretty funny, but you know, sometimes you try to force something and it creates a more negative. So a really funny one in terms of you know, electronic is not always all solutions. You know, I mean, you can do certain things, but a brilliant ad in terms of letting you know, paper has a great future, at least toilet paper. We saw all of that challenge. So interesting one about culture. So you know, it's really much something to think about. As we closing here now, just to let you know, well, tomorrow you have an assignment, and
You to think about is you have one more lecture to go for lecture 10. You are at the end of this semester, at least for leadership. I'm not sure of your other classes. So we have one more lecture to go, and that allows us to, you know, move on to the next stage of this particular program. And those of you who are finishing, well, you know, hats off to you. You've reached a serious milestone. So again, thanks everybody. Continue to be safe. Continue to practice what our government is telling us to do in terms of social distancing, in terms of washing hands, the increased hygiene. You know, just make sure, take note of it. It's not easy. We need to follow the instructions. Yes, we know that um, God is a Trini, but He could be also partying and also doing a lot of other things. So we need to do our part and not just say God is a Trini. Please continue to keep yourself safe, your family stay safe, continue to stay focused. The light is at the end of the tunnel here for your academics. CTS is actually adapting. You are actually adapting as well to online. We're here to guide you. Feel free to send messages to Jude, and we'll definitely support you. So thanks very much for joining, everyone. And I'll chat with you next week, Saturday, for our 10th lecture. Tomorrow, I believe, is your assignment 1. And Jude should have sent out some information concerning it. And we'll make sure that you guys are successful there. And then we'll move on to assignment 2 and see how it goes. I've started submitting some information already to the module leader. So have a little bit of a draft to guide you along that point. So again, do have a great day. Continue to keep yourself safe. Continue to keep your family safe. Observe the rules, regulations that has been given to us. As I said, that there is the public health regulation 4 that has been put out. It is really, really serious. So you want to make sure that you stay focused with it in terms of what's happening. So do have a good day, everybody, and we will chat again. Bye for now.